Welcome to Olive Tree Community Spokane. The following recording is from our Boker Shabbat or Sabbath morning teaching. Today we have the pleasure of presenting author, speaker, and artist Olivier Melnick, Southwest Regional Director of Chosen People Ministries. Let's join Olivier as he begins his presentation to our congregation on Purim, when God acts behind the scene.
All right. Can you hear me okay? Yes? Okay, good. So I've known Joe and Sheila for quite a few years now. And I think I first met Joe when he was general manager of KGNW in Seattle. So that's like 600 years ago. And we've been friends, sometimes in the same area, sometimes at a distance. I moved around quite a bit, but now we're currently in the Dallas area. My wife and I relocated from Maple Valley, Washington, to the greater Dallas area, and with great ministry opportunities. I am the Southwest Regional Director for Chosen People Ministries. Some of you might be familiar with the ministry. We've been missionaries with Chosen People Ministries for 24 years almost. And we specialize in taking the gospel of Yeshua to the Jewish people. I'm originally born in France, in Paris area, from a Jewish family. Parents, Holocaust survivor, and moved here in 1985 after my wife, who is an American Gentile, led this French Jew to the Lord. So we have a mixed marriage, as you call them. And we married for 39 years. We have two children, grown, one daughter married who is in the, who lives still in Washington in Spanaway, and our son married with one child, 33 years old, with one little 18-month-old girl in Irvine, California. So we have two kids, and so that's for me. My wife Ellen is she's here but not here in the room with me, and we've been married for 39 years. One area of specialty of mine is anti-Semitism. For the last 20 years, I've been studying, teaching, writing, speaking on anti-Semitism to equip Christians to understand anti-Semitism better, because really once you not fully, but better understand anti-Semitism, you really, you're given tools to understand and relate to the Jewish people better. So I think it's an important aspect of Jewish life, because anti-Semitism has never really disappeared. It's been repackaged, so to speak, over the centuries, over the decades. And so I do a lot of teaching on that. I have several books. You can find them all on Amazon on the topic of anti-Semitism. I also have a daily devotional book, and you can find me at chosenpeople.com. You can find me at newantisemitism.com. And also, if you are a YouTuber, I am on YouTube at Olivier Melnick Today Through Jewish Eyes. Olivier Melnick Today Through Jewish Eyes. I have a lot of information, a lot of videos. I post a 1-minute devotional every morning of the week, and I post different teachings on the holidays, on end-time prophecies, on Israel, anti-Semitism, as things develop, at least once a week on top of the daily devotional, so on YouTube. Now, how much time do I have, Ella? Don't say the whole day, because I'll take the whole day.
30, 40, 45.
Okay, all right.
You're fine. Yeah.
Okay, good. So let's see what time it is now. Okay, good. All right, perfect. So now, hopefully we'll have some time for questions. But I teach 2 Bible studies on Zoom on Mondays and Wednesdays, and I'm not looking at this morning as a preaching session. I'm looking more at a Bible study, a time to get to exchange information. So throughout my presentation, if there's something that really strikes you funny, or you need understanding, or you need explanation, or you need clarification, or you have a question, raise your hand. I can stop. This is not, I don't want it to be formal, okay? I want it to be interactive if it needs to be. And some of it is probably going to be somewhat of a repeat for you because you just finished with Purim. But I really like the teaching of Purim because there's a lot of encouragement for us in Purim, and as well as some information about historical events that took place back then, that we can look at some history that repeated itself. So some of it you might know, some of it you might not know. So I'm going to try to share my screen now. It worked earlier, so there's no reason why it shouldn't work now, right?
Correct. And I'll be watching for those hands to go up and let you know if I see some.
Okay. So do you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. So that's good. That's a good sign. Let me close. I'm not going to, when it comes to watching the chat room, I'm the worst culprit. I don't watch it. So if you see hands or questions, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat room, or, start with the word question in all cap. It's always easier to locate that way. And if you see me looking this way, sometimes it's because my laptop is right here. My big screen is right here. So we'll start. So we'll talk about Purim, when God acts behind the scene. And let me get right on the right screen, and there you go. So I'll give you a little bit of a timeline to kind of put that in the context of geographically and historically. So of course we all know where Israel is. It's about right here on the map in the Middle East, and then where Purim took place, where the story of Esther is about right there. It says on the map Susa, or in Hebrew Shushan. So those are the two different areas that we're discussing. Mostly, actually, will be the whole story takes place in Susa. Now, of course, Purim today is all over the world, celebrated by Jewish people. So the timeline of Esther and her times, and some other historical milestones, just to give you a little bit of an idea of where things fall. I put some dates here. And by the way, please do not feel like you have to take notes, because I will make a PDF of this PowerPoint, the entire thing, and I will send it to Ella, and she can forward it to all of you. So I don't want you to say, oh my gosh, I missed the last slide, or can you go back, or just relax, enjoy. And I will give you the whole set of notes. This is where you'll see more text, and I'm going to be reading from the slides and discussing things. It's all going to go to you in your email if you want it. So to give you an idea, the Babylonian captivity, 586, 539 BC, and I put the scripture there to look at it if you're interested. That's around the time of the book of Daniel. Then the first return, we'll read about this in Ezra. Then the place of the book of Esther in history is about 465 BC, and it's between Nehemiah and Ezra as far as the books are concerned. In 270 BC, the LXX is composed. What the heck is the LXX? That's the Septuagint. Which to me is a miracle, because when you think about it, the story behind the Septuagint is it was a translation of the Old Testament, the Tanakh, in Greek by 70 scholars, 70 rabbis, who apparently worked. It was put together for the Great Library of Alexandria, and it was around that time, 270 BC. It's composed by 70 rabbis, and they all came to agreement on what was supposed to be in. I don't know if that's possible, because when you put two Jews in a room, you get three opinions. So figure, put 70 rabbis, my goodness, there's no way they're going to agree on anything. Well, God was at work behind the Septuagint, and they agreed on everything. And so the Septuagint is a great resource. I'll tell you why. Because the Septuagint is a Greek translation of the Old Testament that took place almost 300 years before Yeshua came to exist. So we have a group of rabbis who did not have an axe to grind. They did not have an agenda. It was before the coming of the Messiah, in the person of Yeshua, the Messiah. So, for instance, when all the rabbis today argue that the word Alma in Isaiah, and this is not even in your notes, I'm just thinking of that, the word Alma in Isaiah 7:14, the virgin will give birth. And they all say, well, this doesn't really mean a virgin. It means a young woman of marriageable age. It means a young damsel, a young maiden, but it doesn't really mean a virgin for sure, which is not true. It does mean a virgin, and that's important. When the rabbis translated the word Alma from the Hebrew in 7:14, Isaiah 7:14, the prophecy about the virgin conception, there was no doubt in their mind. All 70 rabbis all agreed that the word there is Parthenos. And the word Parthenos in Greek means virgin. No, there's no way it can mean anything else. It means virgin. So the point again is that anything you can check in with the Septuagint, it will be a pre-incarnation by about 300 years prior to the incarnation, and that's huge because there's no agenda, there's no axe to grind. So that's why I put it there to give you an idea. And then 165 BC, you have the Maccabean Revolt. Do you guys know what the Maccabean Revolt brought us as far as Jewish people? Hanukkah. Okay, the Maccabees. And of course, I had to put some kind of a marker here on Messiah, 30 AD, about that time. So that gives you a little bit of a timeline. Again, the book of Esther, 465 BC, around that time. Purim. So some of it again might be just refresher for you. You already did all this, so you know I have it in the presentation, so we'll go through it quickly. Purim is the plural of pur, meaning lot in Hebrew. This is based on Esther 9:24. For Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the adversary of all the Jews, had schemed against the Jews to destroy them and had cast pur, that is the lot, to disturb them and destroy them. Of course, whenever you see bold, it's added by me just so that you can see it better in the text. Purim is a non-Levitical festival. The Levitical feasts of the Lord were instituted by God and originally given to the Jewish people as a memorial to celebrate and worship God on a yearly basis. You probably are familiar with the feasts of the Lord found in Leviticus 23. I would, if you're not familiar, I'm sure you are as a Messianic congregation, but it's a great place to see all the feasts of the Lord. The reason why, some people call them the Feast of Israel. I call them the Feast of the Lord because it says in Leviticus 23, the Feast of the Lord, the feast of the Lord. Not they were given to the Jewish people, but they're called the Feast of the Lord. And once you understand on this side of the cross for believers, Jews and Gentiles, that every single one of the Levitical feasts point to a specific event in the redemptive career of the Messiah, you realize that they're really the feast of the Lord. They have a greater significance. They were given to Israel as a reminder, a yearly reminder, just like we do Thanksgiving every year, because we want to remember certain things. It's on the calendar on a yearly basis. Same thing with Leviticus 23. The feast of the Lord come back every year on that life cycle, the Jewish life cycle. And something to consider is that as they come on the calendar, in a certain order, and as they are fulfilled or will be fulfilled by a specific event in the redemptive ministry of the Lord, they give us the order of eschatology. I mean, this is not something that we're going to discuss in depth today, but Passover, being the first one, was fulfilled by the death of Messiah. First fruit was fulfilled by the resurrection, the first fruit of the resurrection. Then 49 days after that is Shavuot, the Feast of Weeks, fulfilled by the birth of the church. Then you have the church age. Then in the fall feast, which have yet to be fulfilled, you've got the regathering of the saints at Rosh Hashanah. And I'm not saying that I'm not saying the rapture will take place on Rosh Hashanah because we don't have dates, but there's a connection. And then Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, the chastising of Israel during the Great Tribulation, and Sukkot, the Feast of Tabernacles, when the Lord will tabernacle with the believers in the Messianic kingdom, the 1,000-year-old Messianic kingdom. So that's one way to look at the Leviticus feast of the Lord. It's an important aspect of what the Lord wants us to remember on a yearly basis. And because they're called the feast of the Lord, they are not specifically for Israel. They're for everybody to enjoy. And for believers who are not Jewish, what's to enjoy is the fact that they're all connected to an aspect of the ministry of the Messiah, the redemptive ministry of the Messiah. That is why today people have the freedom under grace to celebrate as many or as little of those festivals as they want. And all this was for free because Purim is not even part of it. Purim is a non-Levitical, but it's important because it's in the Bible. But Purim is based on the events that took place in the book of Esther. You knew that. It's also mentioned in extra biblical books, 2 Maccabees, 1536, part of what's known as the Apocrypha. The Apocrypha is not, evangelicals do not accept the Apocrypha as being inspired as part of the Bible. It is part of the Catholic Bible. What I would say is that the Apocrypha has great historical information for us to correlate with the rest of the Bible, like in the case of this book of 2 Maccabees that talks in great detail about the establishment of the Feast of Hanukkah and the battle between the Maccabees. And so it's there. So we are it's important to understand the value of those books, but we do not want to bring them to the level of the inspired word of God because they're not. But Purim is mentioned in 2 Maccabees. Hanukkah is mentioned in 1st, 2nd, and 4th Maccabees, I believe. The book of Esther never mentions God. Now you knew that. You knew that. That's one of the first things we learn about Purim, about the book of Esther. Sorry, is that the book of Esther never mentions God anywhere. And I like to quote Chuck Swindoll. I like what he said, and I'll quote him. Esther is the only book in the Bible not to mention the name of God, but that is not to say that God was absent. His presence permeates much of the story as though he were behind the scenes coordinating coincidences and circumstances to make his will happen. And that's exactly what we see in the book of Esther. There's no doubt in our minds when we read the book of Esther that God was orchestrating the whole thing, even though the whole story reads like a play. It reads like a vaudeville. And that's why so many plays have been put together based on the book of Esther. And we read it. I just read it with my Bible study last Wednesday. We took turns in reading the entire book of Esther. And of course, we made all the noise with the noisemakers on the names and everything. It was a lot of fun. But God is definitely behind the scenes. It's just something that we discover as we read the book of Esther. But it was almost not included in the canon because it was hard to find no name of God in it. It was possibly included in the canon at the Council of Jamnia or Yavne, late 1st century. And it was secured in AD 120 as the Christian church accepted it. So by the 1st century, it was accepted and included in the canon of the Bible. But until then, it was anything you would find about the books of the Bible prior to that date probably did not have, some might, but most of them did not have the book of Esther included because it was still being discussed if it was really part of what should be included. But of course, today it is. Book of Esther is a powerful illustration of the principle of Genesis 12:3. And I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you, I will curse. And in you, all the families of the earth will be blessed. We can even say, I think, we can say with certainty that not only it's an illustration, but it's like a direct, a similar curse for a curse, because if you remember the story of the book of Esther, Haman builds gallows to kill Mordecai, and at the end, it's Haman and his sons hanging on the very gallows he built to kill the Jews. So in this case, it was really a curse for a curse. So I think when we look at Genesis 12:3, we really, really need to take this seriously. And a lot of people in the church ignore it or don't think it's that, we should really not take it, verbatim. Well, we should take it verbatim. Actually, what I like to call this passage, Genesis 12:3, I call it God's foreign policy when it comes to Israel. Genesis 12:3, I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse, can be called God's foreign policy when it comes to Israel. And I don't know, you might not agree with me, but I believe that in the USA, in America, we as a country have been blessed for as long as we've been the friends of Israel. We've been blessing Israel in many ways. Most of the administrations, to the exception maybe of the one prior to Trump and the one now, are not really friends of Israel. But for the most part, America has always been a blessing to Israel, and I think that's why God has blessed America in so many ways, because we are blessed. So we'll keep going here. The story of Esther takes place in Shushan, in Persia, north of the Persian Gulf. Again, it's Susa or Shushan, same. We don't really know who wrote it. It's unknown. We don't know who wrote it. We have the date of about 465 BC, but there's no certainty on who the author was. It takes place during the reign of King Xerxes, who's also known as Ahasuerus in Hebrew. In both cases, both names are hard to say. So it's, Xerxes or Ahasuerus, it's a mouthful in Hebrew or Greek. It divides in 10 chapters, and I'm just going to give you a quick division here, and then we'll go into some of the stuff that we can learn from the book. As the chapters go through, we have the banquet, then the contest, then the promotion and plot, then the intercession, then the second banquet, then the defeat, the verdict, the promotion, the destruction, and the exaltation. Those are all the different things that you find as you build the story through the book of Esther. And again, you've already read it in the last couple of days, so it's probably still very fresh in your mind. But what do we get? What do we get from the book of Esther? I think we can get many different things. First of all, God's sovereignty. You see about God's sovereignty in the book of Esther, because really, again, God is not mentioned, but all the things that take place, all the doors that open and the events that fall into place, only God can make those things happen. And so I put a couple of scriptures to kind of remind us of God's sovereignty at the same time, but you find it in the story of Purim in the book of Esther. Psalm 135, 5-7, for I know that the Lord is great and that our Lord is above all gods. Whatever the Lord pleases, he does in heaven and in earth, in the seas and in the deeps. He causes the vapors to ascend from the ends of the earth, who makes lightnings for the rain, who brings forth the wind from his treasuries. So really, God's sovereignty is all over the Bible, but the feast of the book of Esther is an example of God's sovereignty. Also, God's faithfulness. And think of it, when I mention those, think of it for the Jewish people in the time of Esther, but think of it for the believers today, because we have a relationship with the same God. God hasn't changed. Some people say that the God of the Old Testament is different from the God of the New Testament. That is not true. It's the same God. The God of the Tanakh is the God of the Greek scripture. It's the same God, just a different timeline, different time in history. But we read about God's faithfulness because if God was not faithful, he would have looked away or not paid attention to what took place in Shushan and let the Jewish people in that kingdom at that time be decimated by Haman and his helpers. And so we know of God's faithfulness because God has promised in all covenants he made with the Jewish people, starting with the Abrahamic Covenant, that he was not going to renege on his covenant. And whoever comes to you and tells you that, well, the blessings that God once promised to Israel are now being transferred to the church, that is not true. That is not true. That's not biblical. Because God made promises to Israel in the 8 covenants that God made with mankind. 5 of them are made specifically with Israel. And of those 5, One, the Mosaic covenant is conditional. In other words, it depends on obedience of Israel for blessing or disobedience for curses. But the other four, the Abrahamic, the land, the Davidic, and the new covenant, all those are unconditional, eternal covenant. Unconditional means Israel doesn't have, there's no performance, which is good. Think about it. It's wonderful that it's not based on Israel's performance, because we blew it. The Jews, we blew it through our history. We continue to blow it. Okay, we make mistakes. We reject God. And so if it was based on the history of the Jews that you find in the Bible, if those covenants were all conditional, yes, God would have said, okay, you know, enough with you. I'm going to another people. I'm going to go to the Gentiles. I'm going to go to the church. But that's not what he said. The church is included in the blessings today. There's no question about it. But the covenants were made with Israel, and they are unconditional. In other words, God said, I will. He didn't say, I will if you. He said, I will. It's based on God's character. And if it's based on God's character, you know that God never changes. So we have that promise. If God changes his mind on Israel and decides to give all the promises of Israel to the church, then the question you have to ask yourself is, could he also change his mind on other things? For instance, is my salvation secure, or is he going to change his mind on how I get saved? You have to ask.
I have a question.
Sorry?
I have a question.
Yes.
Olivier.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm looking at the renewed covenant, but I hear it's a new covenant, but it's not. Isn't it a renewed covenant? Because you had all these other covenants based on the last covenant, which is Yeshua, together. That's what I'm curious. Why I'm curious.
Okay, the new covenant is found in
the Brit
Jeremiah.
Hadashah. Yes, but it's a renewed. It's a
No,
renewing
no,
of all the other covenants with the promise of Yeshua becoming the full covenant. Once
So the new covenant, when I speak of the new covenant, I speak of the new covenant that is mentioned in Jeremiah 31. When you look at Jeremiah 31, give me a second here.
Yeah, that's one of my favorites.
So when you look at, and this is not in our lesson, but because I went on 3 rabbit trails already, I only deserve that. So Jeremiah,
yeah, it says here the days are coming, says Yahuwah, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Yehudah. Right. And it will not be like the covenant I made with their fathers on the day. That's right. But it's still
basically
built on all of these other ones together. Just curious is all. Sorry.
What this means, from what I understand, what this means is that there's a new covenant that God is making with Israel, and when Israel and Judah means basically the Jewish people in general. And so Jeremiah 31 through 35,
34, 31 through 34, yeah.
Through 34 is not. It's not a covenant. This is not speaking of the church there.
No, and I didn't mean that way. That's not what I meant. No, because all these other covenants from the very beginning, when he came and put all this together in Bereshit 1, that he goes back to, he looks at this, but then to me, when it says renewed covenant, that I've been looking at was that it became, Yeshua took all these other covenants, including the ones with Israel, and said, now it's a renewed covenant because now I'm Yeshua. So he's come.
I don't see that. I don't see it as all encompassing of the other covenants, because the other covenants are really not. There's a covenant that speaks of the land of Israel, the land covenant.
Right.
So that one doesn't really have. I mean, sure, Yeshua is going to return into the land of Israel to reign from Jerusalem in the millennial kingdom. But
yes.
Yeshua is. I would say that Yeshua is connected to the Abrahamic Covenant because he is the blessing, and he's Jewish. And he's also connected to the Davidic covenant because he is from the line of David and he's a descendant of King David. But
Right.
we can't take them all and say that now they're all represented by Yeshua. So I'm not sure I know exactly I'm not sure I understand exactly what you mean by that. And if it's
I'm sorry, I had a stroke 2 years ago, so I'm still having some issues with my own brain. So we have stroke brain going on. So
well, you have stroke brain and all of us have COVID brain, so don't worry about it.
I understand the stroke brain. I had one 4 years ago, so I do understand.
Yeah, I'm a miracle. I'm everybody that knows me here. I'm a miracle. I should have been dead 2 years ago.
Well, praise God that you're not.
Yes,
right.
he is.
Amen.
This is what he did.
So,
I'm a miracle. So, but
well, let me get back into the different.
yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, we're going in a different direction.
It was
here,
a little
so
bit.
sorry.
You know, the reason why I was talking about the covenant is because it's important to understand that God's faithfulness is connected to his unconditional covenants he made with Israel. He's very faithful because he promised he would be. So we read in Psalm 86:15, but you, O Lord, are a God merciful and gracious, slow to anger and abundant in loving kindness and truth. And 2 Thessalonians 3:3, but the Lord is faithful and he will strengthen and protect you from the evil one. So God is very, very faithful.
Yes, he is.
But God also so we have God's faithfulness, but we have also God's protection. Again, going back to the story of Purim, the story of the book of Esther, there's no doubt in my mind that many things that were done in that book, in that story, would have been extremely dangerous, lethal actually, for the Jewish people if God was not protecting the Jewish people, which he has throughout the history of the Jews. We, the Jewish people, should not exist if it was not for God's protection and God's mercy, because really the whole world has been trying to destroy us. Deuteronomy 31:6, be strong and courageous, do not be afraid or tremble at them, for the Lord your God is the one who goes with you. He will not fail you or forsake you. Isaiah 41:10, do not fear, for I am with you. Do not anxiously look about you, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. Surely I will help you. Surely I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. So I just give you like two scriptures that illustrate God's protection, which we can also find in the book of Esther. Another thing that is more on our end, like more something that we need to realize for us as believers, as people of God, is that we have a responsibility, the believer's responsibility, in Esther 4:14, for if you remain, and I believe that actually, I believe that this is probably the one verse in the book of Esther out of all 10 chapters. This is the one verse that probably points us to a hint towards God being involved. We read, for if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place. And that's about as close as we get to mentioning God. Will arise for the Jews from another place. Another place means it's coming from God. That's what I believe. I mean, it's vague, but there's no other place in the book where we have anything even hinted that would direct us towards God. So I believe that's the only place here. Will arise from another place, and you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not attained royalty for such a time as this. So this is the one verse that tells us that deliverance can come. It will come. It actually did come, and it confirms to us. For us, it's not that difficult because on this side of the cross, with the whole counsel of God in the Bible in our hands, we can see that the book of Esther really is a testimony to God's faithfulness and provision and protection. But there is a responsibility for the believers. What that shows me is that if we find ourselves in a place, and believe me, we are starting to see this right now in current events, and it's probably going to get even much worse. If we find a place we need to speak up, we need to speak up.
Olivier, there's a question. If the new covenant spoken of in Jeremiah is for Israel, what does that mean for us Gentiles?
It includes, sorry, I should have added that. It is not just for, it is made for Israel, but some of its what's the word I'm looking for? Provisions are extended to the Gentiles. The Gentiles, Jews and Gentiles are together in the body of Messiah. Okay, we're one new man. There's no difference as far as justification. I mean, how we enter the body of Messiah. A Jew and a Gentile will enter the body of Messiah the same way, by accepting the death and resurrection of Yeshua for our sins. A Jew is not in just by virtue of being Jewish, and a Gentile doesn't need to go through Jesus. All of us, nobody comes to the Father but through the Son. So all of us are the same in the body of Messiah. Originally, the new covenant was ratified between God and the house of Judah and the house of Israel, but now some of its provision and some of its blessings are extended to the Gentiles. You see this clearly in some of the epistles and in the teaching of Paul, that the blessings of the new covenant have been extended to the Gentiles. So now Jews and Gentiles are incorporated in the body of Messiah. There's no question about that.
I have a comment on that, if you don't mind.
Sure.
In Romans, I think it's in Romans, when it talks about the grafting in of the Gentiles.
Yeah. I can't hear you. Are you there? Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can still hear you. There may have
Okay,
been a problem
I
with his
cannot
mic.
hear the gentleman speaking.
I think he might have a problem with his mic. We do have Catherine with her hand raised. Catherine, did you want to continue? She had a question.
Yes. So I'm just going to kind of play off of what Sally was saying about the quote renewed covenant. So the very first covenant that Abba created with Israel when they came out of Egypt did not have any sacrificial or Levitical law to it, but they blew that. So then he gave them Levitical law and the sacrificial system. So when Sally's talking about the renewed covenant, she's talking about how God renewed that very, very first covenant before the golden calf incident. And so when people read about the quote new covenant written about in the New Testament, a lot of people read that as the renewed covenant, the very first one that was given on Mount Sinai. And
the Mosaic, you're talking about the Mosaic covenant.
The very, very first one, yes, given to
Moses. The very first one that was I think the very first one is the Abrahamic Covenant. That's when God.
I meant after they came out of Egypt. The first.
Okay, so the first covenant that came that was given by God when they came out of Egypt was the Mosaic covenant, the covenant of the giving of the law, which was the only one that is conditional. That's the one that if Israel obeys, Israel will be blessed. If Israel disobeys, Israel will be disciplined. All the others are not that way, that were made with Israel. So I'm trying to understand, what are you getting to when you say renewed covenant in the New Testament? I'm trying to understand where you're going with that.
Okay, so I'm trying to clarify because a lot of Messianic believers that I know, when they read the word new covenant, they actually replace the word new with the word renewed covenant.
But I don't think it's biblical.
Well, I don't think it is either. Because
so we agree, so we can move on.
No, there's a question attached to it.
Okay.
So my question is that in the covenant, the Mosaic covenant, when God spoke to the people Israel and said, if you do this, I will be your God and I will supply for you. And it was like the marriage covenant between Israel and Abba the Father. And then, Moses went up on the mountain and was gone for 40 days. And then they messed up. And then they were given more laws. Then they were given the sacrificial system. They were given all of that. And then so when we come into the New Testament, the new covenant through Messiah, is that covenant that we have through Messiah, the renewed covenant? Does it go back to being the original Mosaic covenant
No,
with the Father.
no.
I
No,
didn't
it
think
can't.
so. Okay, you
No, it
clarified
can't.
that. Thank you.
It cannot be, because that Mosaic covenant is the covenant that included the Mosaic law included 613 commandments, and that has been but being under grace right now, this has been rendered inoperative. We're no longer under the bondage of the law. So no, it has not been renewed. It has been superseded. Now, there's nothing wrong with the law, the 613 commandments that God gave, but they were all given to show how you should keep all of them to be perfect in God's eyes, which of course nobody but Yeshua could do that. And so that this has not been renewed. We are not under a renewed or a better Mosaic covenant. We are simply under grace in a new, for lack of a better word, a new dispensation.
Okay. Well, 613 commandments. Some of those were for the Levites. Some of those was for the priests. Some of them for women. Some of them strictly for men in certain situations. So you can't keep all 613 because they belong to different people. It's not. There's not.
Right, but
as a woman, there's not 1,613 commandments.
I understand,
just for
but
me as a woman.
As a believer today, you don't have to keep any of them.
Well,
that's where I'm coming from. We're really, I really don't have. I have a certain amount of time, and I mean, I can continue speaking on that topic if you want, but I will not be able to finish the story of Purim. Whatever is more important to you guys.
Okay.
You don't have to limit yourself to 45 minutes, but I understand what you're saying. It's it might be something we can return at another time.
I know I don't have to limit myself, but I only had from
that's
from 1
good.
to 3. So
sure.
I'm
sorry.
No. I'm not upset at all. But I'm 7 minutes from being another appointment. So I don't want to.
Okay. Let's have you back to discuss this. I think that might be a good way.
It is partially my mistake, because I told you could ask questions throughout the whole thing.
That's what, we'll ask.
and that's perfectly fine. And I certainly don't want to sound like I'm brushing you off, because those are important questions. But at this point, we have to make a choice. Do we want to finish Purim, or do you want to talk about the covenant?
I
would say go ahead and finish Purim. We can always come back.
But I do not want the sister to feel like I'm brushing her off.
Well, I don't feel brushed off. I just thank you for answering my question.
Yes, okay, it's an interesting conversation.
No, this is good though. Thank you. Me as well. Thank you.
Good. All right. So going back to this, the believer's responsibility. Let me go back on this page so I can click. Hold on. Where am I? Okay, I'm on the screen right here. So Ezra 10:4, arise, for this matter is your responsibility, but we will be with you. Be courageous and act. So there is a certain amount. Just those verses I'm using to show you other verses to illustrate the fact that within the story of Esther, there's God's sovereignty, God's faithfulness, God's protection and provision, but also the believer's responsibility. Those are the big points I get from Purim. Now, as far as what we learn from Purim, change the color here all of a sudden, Haman's legacy, and that's something that I wanted to touch on briefly. 4 or 5 different things from the book of Esther, and you might have already heard that. One man's jealousy led to uncontrolled hatred. Esther 3:5. When Haman saw that Mordecai neither bowed down nor paid homage to him, Haman was filled with rage. So basically, uncontrolled hatred because of one Jewish man. Targeted hatred became global hatred. The next verse, but he disdained to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had told him who the people of Mordecai were. Therefore, Haman sought to destroy all the Jews. For one man, Mordecai, who just refused to bow down, Haman decided, I'm going to kill all the Jews I can. The people of Mordecai, who are throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus. So the targeted hatred became global hatred. It was like all the Jews because of one. So keep that in the back of your mind. That's Haman's legacy. Keep those things in the back of your mind. So Esther 3:13, again, letters were sent by couriers to all the king's provinces to destroy, to kill and annihilate all the Jews, both young and old, women and children, in one day, the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, and to seize their possessions as plunder. Hatred, in 3:8, hatred was caused by non-conformity. They're different. They look different. They eat different. They act different. They speak different. They are not conforming to who we are. So then Haman said to King Ahasuerus, there is a certain people scattered and dispersed among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom. Their laws are different from those of all other people, and they do not observe the king's laws. So it is not in the king's interest to let them remain. So Haman is trying to convince the king that, you know what, we got to get rid of the Jews. So hatred was caused by non-conformity. An attempt at destruction was structured and organized. We see it in Esther 3:9-11. If it is pleasing to the king, it's Haman speaking, let it be decreed that they be destroyed. So it's organized, it's going to be declared officially. And I will pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those who carry on the king's business to put into the king's treasuries. Then the king took his signet ring from his hand and gave it to Haman, the son of Ammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. The king said to Haman, the silver is yours, and the people also, to do with them as you please. So now we've got an attempt at destruction, which is structured and organized. Esther 3:12, then the king's scribes were summoned on the 13th day of the month, and it was written just as Haman commanded to the king's satraps, to the governors who were over each province, and to the princes of each people, each province according to its script, each people according to its language, being written in the name of King Ahasuerus and sealed with the king's signet ring. Letters were sent by couriers to all the king's provinces to destroy and kill and annihilate all the Jews, both young and old, women and children, in one day, the 13th day. I've already read that verse. So that was all under the attempt at destruction of the Jews, structured and organized. And now we see that it was also financed. Important funding came from the perpetrator. In verse 9 of chapter 3, if it is pleasing to the king, let it be decreed that they will be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those who carry on the king's business to put into the king's treasuries. So all this that Haman did to get rid of the Jews, one man's jealousy led to uncontrolled hatred. Targeted hatred became global hatred. Hatred was caused by nonconformity. Attempt at destruction was structured and organized. Important funding came from the perpetrator. All those things were Haman's legacy. But guess what? You look at all those, they're not just Haman's legacy. Fast forward to the 1930s and 1940s, they became Hitler's policies. They are completely identical to Hitler's policies to get after the Jews. You see all those things happening, parallel to what happened during the Book of Esther. Hitler's used the same. The same points can be put carbon copy on top, and you go like that's exactly the way Hitler's and Nazi Germany operated to get rid of the Jews. So much so that when in 1946, when a man by the name of Julius Streicher, and you can actually learn about a little more about that if you go to my YouTube channel. I have a Purim video that I put that has a little more details on that part of the lesson. But a man by the name of Julius Streicher, who was one of Hitler's main guy for propaganda and different things. I forgot his title. He has a very long title. He was the publisher of a very anti-Semitic newspaper called Der Stürmer, I think something to do with the storm, I think. Der Stürmer, extremely anti-Semitic paper. And actually that paper and what was in that paper is what caused him, Julius Streicher, to be arrested and accused and found guilty of crimes against humanity because of what he did in his paper for several years. And in 1946, they hung him on the gallows, as he went up on the gallows and they put the noose around his neck, his last words were Purim Fest 1946. You can check it out. It's in history books. Julius Streicher, as he was being hung at the end of the Nuremberg trials, his last words were Purim Fest, 1946. So that meant that he had an understanding of the book of Esther, of what happened during Purim, and he was basically trying to say the Jews are after me. It's because of the Jews I'm being killed. So there's another connection there. So that's the parallel between the methodology of Haman and the methodology of Hitler during the Nazi Germany era.
You have to wonder if Hitler, when you go back in genealogy, how many was Hitler an Agagite like Haman? Like
that
we have to wonder.
Yeah, I don't think so. I really don't think so. But Hitler was definitely evil.
Evil.
And he was not. Something about Hitler is that Hitler was not insane. People say all the time, well, Hitler was insane. You cannot say that Hitler was insane. I'll tell you why. Because insanity gives you the excuse to say, I was not in my right mind. Insanity exonerates you from responsibility. So that doesn't work. Hitler was evil, even probably demon possessed. But he was not insane. He was actually quite smart and very, very good at what he did, but he was evil. So, that's all I have. I have a couple more slides that you will get in the presentation, but they're just examples of the prayer we say for Purim and pictures of Purim, which I don't want to waste any more of the valuable time that we have together, because right now what I want to do is I want to stop sharing and have you back on the screen. Ta-da! And then if we have a few more questions, it's 3 o'clock here my time, but I'll extend my time a little bit because I made the mistake of telling you you could interrupt me anytime you wanted.
Well, that's why we decided to put it. Yeah, that's why we are people who love to ask. We want to know more, and that's a great thing. That's why we started using Yeshiva, because we knew there would be always questions somewhere in conversation.
That's perfectly fine, but anyway. So for a few more minutes, if you have questions. Okay. Let's go for another 10 minutes, and then I really have to run.
Okay, so we're gonna do a little switch in our order if there are questions. Catherine, you did have your hand up. Did you want to please unmute your mic when you go to ask your question? I'll watch for any hands that are raised.
Okay, so this may sound really stupid, but in the way things are going right now, where you have a rise in Islam, and then you have, which completely hate the Jews, and then you have a rise in anti-Semitism throughout even the United States, and there's just basically a rise in antagonistic behavior between lots of group people. Do you believe that this is basically the same spirit of that started back in the day of Esther?
Basically, and I speak a lot on that in this. Oh, you can see the book, right? Okay, well, that's interesting. Great, here you go. End Times Anti-Semitism. This is on my website, and this is on Amazon as well. End Times Anti-Semitism. I speak on this quite a bit in that book. The answer is simple. Anti-Semitism is a creation of Satan. So Satan started early in the Bible, and as soon as he discovered that the Jewish people were the apple of God's eye, and that Messiah would come through the Jewish people, and that when Messiah comes, especially when Messiah returns, his career is over, his being Satan's career is over. He wants to stop Messiah from returning. He wants to stop the Jewish people from calling Baruch haba b'Shem Adonai, to have Yeshua return. So whatever he can do to stop the Jewish people from connecting with Jesus and from loving Jesus, he will do. He created anti-Semitism to destroy the Jews and to create incredible, a lot of antagonism between Jews and Christians, which where we are right now. When you think about it, the 2,000 years of church history, a lot of damage has been done against the Jews in the name of Christ, not necessarily by Christians. So the source has always been the same. It's Satan. And Satan has been really good at subcontracting his hatred to different groups. So he'll subcontract his hatred to Muslims. He'll subcontract it to Nazis. He'll subcontract it to the left, to the right, to the atheists, to academia, to Hollywood, even to the church. There are people in the church who hate the Jews. Go figure. So he will just use whoever he can over the centuries and repackage anti-Semitism in different ways. That's why we speak of new anti-Semitism. I speak of end times anti-Semitism. I don't think a lot of people do that, because it's the same hatred of the Jews repackaged and subcontracted to different groups, but it's the same. So the hatred you see from the Muslims today is the same hatred that you see from the liberal left. And what's fascinating to me is that it comes from Satan, and Satan is the master deceiver, and he can make something completely irrational look rational as he's deceiving people. So why do I say that? Because the liberal left and radical Islam are on two opposite sides of the ideological spectrum. You put a radical leftist and a radical Muslim in the same room, only one comes out. Probably the Muslim, because the radical left will probably go in the corner and say, this is my safe space. But never mind, that was a bad joke.
With their blanket.
Yeah, exactly. But the point is, you cannot get a radical Muslim or even a Muslim, because, I use radical Muslim for people that want to hear me say that, but I believe that a Quran believing Muslim has no choice but to be radical. The Muslims who are moderate Muslims are just Muslims who don't read the Quran. They're just cultural Muslims. That's what I believe. Because if you read the Quran and you obey the Quran, you have no choice but to kill the infidels. That's what it says.
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't make it up. Okay.
Right.
So you get a Muslim on one side. And again, I'm not saying all Muslims are bad people. Not at all. But they're indoctrinated against the Jews, and you get the left, and then they don't agree on anything except, hey, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So let's go after Israel. So it's all coming from Satan. I don't know if it's more of an answer than you wanted for your question. But
We do have another hand. We do. Thank you, Catherine.
My husband has read the Quran, and he's got another one too. And he tells people all the time, don't you realize that they're going to kill you? That's their main objective, is to kill you.
If you read the Quran, this is the only conclusion you can come with. Do you have another question?
We do have another question. Yochanan has his hand up. Yochanan, please unmute your mic.
Where do you go?
He's sorry.
Oh, there he is. You have to unmute your mic.
He's got it. Sometimes it takes a minute to get the mouse and the mic to play nice together. He's having a difficulty getting it. The mic to unmute. So
maybe you want to type your answer. You type your question.
Well, he did put the question. He did say the first relied on both parties, Jews and God, fulfilling the performance standards as enumerated. The second covenant was made by God for the benefit of all mankind and secured by God and only Him. So he may be. Oh, there he is.
That wasn't my question. I was just making clarification statement. Yeah.
Thank you.
I really want to thank you for what you've presented, because I agree with everything you've said. The one thing that I would point to is that Enoch said that the epoch basically was a period that ran from 300 AD to 1000, the Dark Ages, basically. The year 1000, when the Western Orthodox Church excommunicated the Eastern Orthodox Church. The Eastern Orthodox Church excommunicated the Western Orthodox Church. And it was truly a dark time in the world, because God's word was only in Latin. No one really spoke Latin except the professional clergy. The last person to represent God in the way that I believe was meaningful was Jerome, who's called the doctor of the church. And he left because when the professional clergy came in, they didn't like him and he didn't like them. And he went into Jerusalem and spent the rest of his years actually running a Messianic fellowship there in Jerusalem with the rabbis that actually taught him his Hebrew. So to say that, to say this, we're not even touching what has happened to our understanding of almost everything.
Okay.
We look at what we're doing now and practicing as the church. We have a lot to learn from Esther. In fact, as I mentioned before in previous conversations, if it wasn't for Esther, we wouldn't have had the content to understand the fulfillment of other prophecies in the scripture. One of those prophecies was that the blessing of Benjamin, not the blessing, it's the words that were spoken over Benjamin by his father regarding him in the last days. It makes no sense on its face, but in the face of what is said in Esther, you can clearly see what he means and what is understood. The declaration or the covenant or the commitment made by the king to what's Esther's uncle's name?
Mordecai.
Mordecai. That was such a substantial covenant that it covered maintaining the existence of the people from when Haman were to destroy them. It went from Haman destroying them and them surviving all the way through to the Messiah and on.
Right. Yeah. So that
was one period for Mordecai. So Esther is essential. That it was the last book to be put in there doesn't surprise me at all. But it was essential.
Yeah, I agree. I agree that it is an important book, and it's definitely there's a lot in this book. At first glance, it reads like a play that's not taken very seriously. But you're right. I mean, the fact that God, there's a lot of things in the book that show that God was way involved behind the scenes. So thank you, Yohanan, for that extra explanation. We have time for one more question.
Okay. We really thank you for your time. Are there any other questions we want to pop? Anyone else?
Anyone else? Questions, complaints, anything?
No complaints from here.
Olivier, I just wanted to say, I know Barbara and I, we listened to a presentation of yours. I don't know, it's been 9.5 years ago. I get your email pretty much daily, and it's been a blessing, and we really appreciate your being here today. So I just wanted to add that.
And the extra time, the extra time that you took for us. We would love to have you back again while Joe is on sabbatical, if you have time.
I was going to say, you never know, I might come back again, but I'm not gonna make any promises because
of course,
as COVID dwindles down until the next crisis they throw at us, I'm starting to travel again. So,
God bless you and keep you safe as you travel.
Amen.
As these things open up. And thank you again. I'm going to go ahead and we'll close the recording for this point. Thank you for joining us. For more info about Olive Tree Community, visit olivetreecommunityspokane.com. Join us on Messianic Joy Radio via live365.com for 24/7 Messianic music and teaching, or download the Live 365 app and search for Messianic Joy. To help present our videos to new viewers, please like, share, or leave a comment on this video. If you would like to receive regular updates on our videos, please subscribe and use the notification bell. Shabbat Shalom.